All right, boys and girls, in today's topic, we are talking about buying versus renting. With prices, interest rates, and rents changing all the time, people are asking, is it worth buying right now or should I rent? And today we're going to break that down. Before we really get into this, it's important to understand what the market is doing right now. Interest rates are still at a pretty much of an all-time high. Now they are on the way down, but the national average is around 6% right now, which makes payments pretty high as well. Home prices are all over the board. There are some areas that have cooled off big time. Also some areas that are still pretty competitive. We have a house that we're taking live today, has 9 showings on it today, very first day. We haven't seen that kind of activity in a long time. We also have houses that have been on the market for 70 plus days and haven't had many showings at all. So depending on where you're going and what you're buying, depends on how active that market really is. But on the rental side, most numbers have stabilized overall. The downside is they're still way higher than they were prior to COVID. And prior to 2020. And then inventory is still pretty much at an all-time low, although there are, again, some markets that are creeping up. And overall, the market is up about 30% year over date for the inventory. But on the rental side, the folks that are holding on to, like, say, my rate, which is 2.85, I'm not going to rent my house out. I'm not going to move at all, right? So that is one thing that's holding back kind of the rental inventory and keeping prices a little bit higher as well. And overall, whether it's a rental or a house for sale, as long as it's priced pretty good and competitive, they're seeming to go pretty quick still. And the people that are trying for a top dollar, not so much. They're doing some price reductions, more days on the market. Usually ends up putting the seller, and I know that's not what this video is about, but in kind of a worse spot compared to just pricing aggressive out the get-go. So let's talk about when renting makes sense. And of course, I'm a real estate agent. I do have some skin in the game, but obviously I get paid more when you buy a house or sell a house than renting. I don't want to cut my throat here, but for the first time in my career, and I've been in business for 14 years, renting actually is cheaper right now than it was buying. Now, I'm sure that there are some markets out there that are not that way, but overall, NAR did a study. In many markets around the country, the average monthly cost to own a starter home can be over $1,000 more than renting the similar place, making renting more affordable in 2025 for many people. And there is some truth to that. When the average starter home's $3,000, but you can rent a house for $2,000, it kind of makes sense. Real estate, you have to understand, is a long-term investment. I never want you to buy on the short-term idea that you're going to make some money, because most of the time you need a few years to season in that house to actually get into some serious money. Not only paying down the mortgage because it's front-loaded with interest in the beginning, but also just the market to gain some ability to give you some equity in that home. So short-term, if you're moving in, say, 2 to 3 years, renting probably is a better scenario. If you want some flexibility too, and this is where I think of, on the top of my head, couples that are splitting up. It's very sad, but a lot of folks will come to me because they know I'm in real estate. And they say, oh man, I can't wait to go buy. As soon as we get done here, I want to buy. And I tell them, you might want some flexibility in the beginning to kind of just get back on your feet and rent and not have to deal with anything really. Something breaks, you call the landlord. Flexibility is nice, especially, again, you pair that with, like, say, short term where you're traveling or something like that. If you're going through like a major life change, maybe renting is not a bad idea. Let's get back on the feet. Let's get everything back in order. Let's get the house back in order per se, and then let's go back about buying your house. Now, if you run across a steal deal, I'm never going to slow you down, but it's not always a bad idea just to get everything back in order and kind of get calm again. And then we also have that lower upfront cost. Now, you might have to pay double month's rent or security deposit, which would set you back a couple $1,000s on the average rent of, say, $2,000 a month. But when you're buying a house, you have other fees. And there's more to it just than your down payment. One, you have utilities, which you're going to have in renting anyway, but you also have, like, closing costs, taxes, insurance of the actual property, not just your possessions. And so a good rule of thumb is 3% of the overall cost of that house. So if it's $3,000, the closing costs associated could be around $9,000. Could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit less. Same if we're saying $400,000, could be up to $12,000, something along those lines. So your lender's going to work hand in hand on making sure you know these numbers and how we're covering them, whether we're covering them out of your cost or say we get a seller credit where we can get some closing cost assistance. That would be another option that we could do as well. But just know it is more than just the down payment that's going to be required to buy that house. You also have things like inspections, home inspection, septic and well, termite, water, lead-based paint, radon. There's a lot of different inspections that you can go into, and each one of those could cost, say, $200, $300, $400, $500 each. That's another out-of-pocket cost. Now, well worth it. I want to make that very clear. That way you're buying an asset that you've checked out and you've done your due diligence and make sure that that house is in good shape. It is well worth a couple $1,000s, so you're not worrying about tens of thousands of dollars on the back end when you don't do a septic inspection. You buy that house and then it fails years later. Let's talk about when buying really makes sense. So long-term investment. If we're buying that house, we're going to live there in say 5+ years, then real estate probably makes sense to be buying. Also, yeah, just the equity buildup that you can have in that. We had a huge run, obviously everybody's aware, in 2020 on houses. Almost everybody got $100,000 worth of equity. Sometimes people got a lot more than that too. So it is nice to have the equity and that real estate for your net worth, right? That background. When I'm thinking investments, I'm thinking about your real estate side, and you have your stocks and your bonds. And then you have yourself, your self-worth and what you can bring to the table with your paycheck. But all three of these things are different hats. So maybe stocks aren't doing that good, but maybe real estate is. And they're working together to make you, again, whole in your net worth. I always think real estate, long-term investment, you're going to live there, say 20, 30, 40 years. You're going to buy it for 60 grand and it's going to be worth $1 million one day. You hear about that all the time. A good example is my mom's been in real estate for a very long time. The average Rambler was 100 grand back in the day. The average split 4-year is $60,000. The average 2-story you could buy for about $120,000. That was in the 90s when I was born, 30 years ago, let's say. The average Rambler now is probably around 500. 2-story, 530. Split 4-year, those are even going for about $450,000. That is the compound interest that is growing over years. Again, so the equity, long-term investment, it's hands down the best in my opinion. And then let's talk about just the structure and the stability of it too. It's a fixed payment. Again, mine, I don't want to brag, but 2.85. That payment's never going to change. Now, taxes and insurance can change a little bit, but the principal and interest of that property will stay locked in for a 30-year rate. You can do 15, you can do other terms as well. If we refinance, we're restarting this whole thing. I've owned my house for 6 years now, and the payment has changed, but we're talking about maybe $200 over those years versus rent changing every year and then you buying again a much higher asset down the road, stuff like that. So the stability of having the locked in term is nice as well. There's also this thing that maybe you're just not ready. Maybe renting's not a bad idea. Maybe buying is. These are all questions that a good realtor and a good lender is going to dive deep and help you figure out. And then you also have people like your parents that you can check out. So I never want to push anybody to rent or buy. Really, the decision's yours. I'm here to help guide. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I'll leave all my contact information in the video. As always, I appreciate everything you guys do. I'll see you on the next one.